Looks good to me.
Fade out.
Oh, that was classy. Must be DJ. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Wilkinson Public Library of Telluride, Colorado, and thanks for coming out tonight. It's a delight to see your faces in pandemic times. As you might notice, it's a little cool in here. We have our windows open. Might prop up the door if we get real crowded in here. So I brought my buffalo coat and 2 puppies. If anybody needs to borrow one from me, holler. It might be a little chilly, but we're in a plague. We care about each other. So, the least we can do is just wear some masks, have some good ventilation, and be here to learn about some really, really high level avalanche knowledge from the one and only Ryan Howe. Thank you so much, Howdy, for being here tonight. I am Joanna Spindler here from the Wilkinson Public Library, and I'm not going to beat you over the head about this, but we have a really cool event coming up in March. We're giving away books for it beforehand, featuring the amazing Powder Days by Heather Hansman. We'll be giving away like town-wide level amounts of books for this, so that as many of you who want to can read this. I just started reading it yesterday, and it's by a dirtbag / scientist / analyst who's truly amazing. She wrote a book called River Days that some of you might have read a couple years ago. And she'll be here to join us in March. But before that time, we'll also have a ton of other cool events that center snow and what it is to live in a mountain town, and particularly in a ski town and ski culture in a really dynamic time. So check that out. We've got little flyers about it in the back and a calendar. Everything we do here at the library is free. We love you. Thanks everybody who's here tonight, and I'll pass it over to Tex.
Thanks, Joanna, and thanks to the library for hosting this. Thank you all for coming. I'm John Tuckman. I'm the snow safety manager at the ski resort here. I'm with the Pi Fund, and I just really, before we start getting into it tonight, I want to thank Heidi Lauterbach, who's not here. For those of you who know, a big hand for Heidi. She's been the director of the Pi Fund since its inception. Julie, how long has it been? 6 years, 5-6 years, and helping to produce all of the events and the programming that we do. And she this season has taken a step back from the Pi Fund, and first off, we owe her a debt of gratitude for really being a foundational person with this program and helping carry the torch for what we do. And after she said she was leaving, we started asking around the community who's got some time and interest and would be value added here, and everybody kept saying, Chris Dixon, you should talk to Chris Dixon. And Chris is now the director of the Pi Fund. He's a ski guide, avalanche educator, podcast host, and we look forward to really moving this project forward with him and with all of you guys, because a big part of what the Pi Fund does and what Pi was all about is this community. So anyway, I want to introduce Chris. Thanks for joining us. And take it away.
All right. Do y'all mind if I take my mask off? I'm standing over here.
It's okay.
Sweet.
I don't know. Is it okay?
You're
I'm just setting the precedent for Ryan, because I know he probably wants to take his off for now.
we have the air purifier right next
Oh,
to you.
I love
and
it.
an open window right here. So
That is some good air. Thanks, Joanna. Sweet. Thanks, everyone. As John said, my name is Chris Dixon. I actually moved to Telluride in 2015, just a few months after Pi passed away. So I kind of feel like I missed an opportunity to interact with a legend, but this is a really great way to engage with his legacy. So just curious, you all found your way here this evening, but who here knows what the Pi Fund is? Raise your hand. Great. We have some hands that aren't raised. Okay. Keep your hand raised if you ever met Pi. Maybe a few out there. Can you raise your hand if you've ever received a scholarship from the Pi Fund? Nice. A few hands in the room. Great. So really what I'm here to talk about is just what the Pi Fund does. And then I'm going to introduce Ryan, who's going to get into kind of the meat of our conversation and tonight's discussion. Before I do that, though, I just want to recognize some of the sponsors that make these backcountry chats possible and the folks who support the Pi Fund. That includes the Wilkinson Public Library, Telluride Mountain Club, Mountain Trip, Telluride Mountain Guides, Telluride Heli Tracks, San Juan Outdoor Adventures, and all of those folks have been supporting the Pi Fund since its inception, more or less, in addition to Telluride Ski Resort. So we're super grateful for them and for you all who engage with our programming and donate to our nonprofit. So without further ado, the Pi Fund. This is one of my favorite images. So for those of you who don't know, the Pi Fund, Pi, is actually this man, Peter Ingalls. And he was a legend in his time and a legend to this day. And I wish I got to meet this man. But Pi was super influential in the Telluride backcountry skiing community. He was a ski patroller for over 20 years at the Telluride Ski Resort, as well as a really integral member of our search and rescue team and a founding member of the Telluride Mountain Club. So he was a big deal in the community. And in his absence, a bunch of friends got together on a porch one day and just decided we need to do something to memorialize this guy and to make his legacy lasts forever here in Telluride. And so they established the Pi Fund. And really what the Pi Fund is all about is trying to create a safer backcountry community. Pi's real desire was to increase our avalanche awareness in the Telluride community through backcountry education. So the way we do that is we provide scholarships for avalanche courses. Those folks who raised their hands maybe got a little bit of money this year. We also host and coordinate these backcountry chats, which you're currently involved in. And then some of you may or may not know this, but Matt Steen, who's a board member with the Pi Fund, put in place the first backcountry radio program in the country here in Telluride, establishing designated channels for the different backcountry areas folks recreate to increase communication and try and reduce accidents. And you may not know this, but you can also still to this day rent a BCA backcountry radio at Jagged Edge. So we also help work with the Jagged Edge on those radio rentals. I've used that in the past, had friends coming into town, they don't have radios. It's great to have communication amongst your group, and it's free at Jagged Edge. Big project that we've been working a lot on this year, and I'll show you a photo of it in a second, is having beacon checkers. These are avalanche transceiver checkers set up at all the backcountry access points on the Telluride ski area. Those are now all installed, on board, and live. So anytime you're going to a backcountry gate off the ski resort, you can now have your beacon checked before you walk through that gate. I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. Also, we've been working with the Friends of the CAIC, as well as some folks over in Silverton, to get these Recognize the Avalanche Hazard posters put up at backcountry trailheads around the San Juans. So there's actually 12 locations where these are going to be set up on a big wooden kiosk. Did anyone see these last year? They were out. They went out like, I think halfway through the winter. But anyways, the goal of this is to try and reduce folks wandering into avalanche terrain without awareness of where they are or what they're getting themselves into. And if the accident on Hoosier Pass illustrates anything, it's that some folks are not aware that they're in avalanche terrain until they are tragically caught in an avalanche. So the goal of this is to try and increase awareness and increase education and have folks get the forecast before they get out the door. So look for these at all the backcountry trailheads throughout our region, as well as Silverton and Red Mountain Pass in the coming days. And then also we work with the Telluride Foundation to put together the Skidala event. Has anyone heard of that? It was new as of 2 years ago. There's a Skidala hat in the audience. Nice, Will. It's like the Rundala, but it's the winter version. So folks, what is this saying? Skin, shoe, or scramble? I don't remember, but however you want to get up there, you start at the bottom of the gondola, go to the top. It's a big race, and it's a lot of fun. So that's going to be happening in March 23rd to be exact. And it's a big fun event. We're going to try and make that a big fundraiser for the Pi Fund for scholarships for next winter. And then coming soon, we're excited to work more with a Telluride Ski Resort and do some facilitation days at the Beacon Basin. Raise your hand if you've ever used Beacon Basin on the ski area. Some folks have. Cool. We have this amazing resource where you can practice your avalanche transceiver skills. And after tonight's talk, you're going to find a bunch of different things that you can probably improve upon with your avalanche rescue. So we're going to start doing some facilitation days where myself or another person from the Pi Fund is there kind of running you through the drills and also giving you some coaching and feedback. And then ultimately, we're trying to put that all together with an end of the season Beacon Bash, where you assemble a team and we race people in an avalanche rescue scenario to try and win fun prizes and support the Pi Fund. So stay tuned for more about that. But ultimately, we are here to serve you, the backcountry community of Telluride and the Telluride region. So really, we're curious, what do you want to see out of the Pi Fund? And As the new director, I'm excited to grow this organization and to try and figure out how to best meet the needs of our backcountry community. So look for a survey coming out in the near future for how we can better serve you all. And then lastly, woohoo, here's a fully installed beacon checker. And this is at the Bald Mountain Gate, the Baldy Saddle. And if you can see up here, this is the checker actually up here. And this gate, which has kind of always been here, but most people just walk right around it. We're going to try normalizing walking through the gate. It's a symbolic passageway into the backcountry. And also, guess what? The only way you're going to get your beacon checked is if you walk directly under the sensor. So now this gate will be swinging open and closed a whole bunch more this winter, thanks to the work of John Tuckman, Jagged Edge, and Heidi getting these beacon checkers put out there. And then this is one of those CIC trailhead signs. So this is hopefully a lot of information shouting, you're entering the backcountry. This is not patrolled terrain. And that'll hopefully increase our safety overall as a community. Cool. So without further ado, I have to get out my notes here because I don't want to miss anything. Our tonight's speaker is Ryan Howe, and he is a longtime local. He is a ski patroller as well as owner and head guide for Telluride Mountain Guides. And a quick rundown of his experience. He started patrolling and guiding in 1988 up in Montana. Then he, 1998?
Yeah, not that old yet.
Did I say 88?
Yeah.
He's not that old.
He's an old man.
No, not that old yet.
Sorry, he started patrolling and guiding in 1998 up in Montana. Then he moved down here, worked for Silverton for a couple of years. And then there's a laundry list of comical jobs that I just have to share. So he's been a rock and ski guide in Montana, Idaho, Arizona, and Colorado. This guy's a Renaissance man. He's been a sawyer, carpenter, house painter, campus dorm janitor, challenge course facilitator, canyoneering guide, golf caddy, deck building business owner, dishwasher, plant science and riparian restoration ecology tech, short order chef, shuttle driver, and last but not least, Grand Canyon Dory boatman. Not to mention he's a writer for the Gulch magazine, as well as does freelance journalism. Oh, and the last and maybe most important thing, is he's a father to two rough and tumble Norwood kiddos. And so without further ado, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Ryan Howe, who's our speaker for this evening.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks everybody for being here. This is really exciting. It's cool to see these community events and just to build on the legacy of what Peter Ingalls brought to this community, which is really just a passion for the mountains and a desire to incorporate that into our lives in a way that's like legit. I think Pi was really, at least in my experience, he embodied those things. So tonight, we're going to try to dive into Avalanche Rescue, and we're using the Pro-1 rescue exam as kind of like a framework, but it's really not the whole point of it. We're going to try to contrast that with some real life scenarios that thankfully have been captured on video, because we're always wearing these gadgets on our heads. Not all of us, but a lot of people are, especially in the Alps. I'll get into what the Pro-1 rescue exam looks like. And these notes come from my experience teaching these courses where professional avalanche workers are essentially demonstrating proficiency at an industry standard level. So we take notes and on each student or each candidate, I suppose it could be called. And so I have kind of like a field book of notes for about 100 students, but we condensed it into 50 for the sake of this discussion. Most notably, I think the goal of this is to encourage this concept within our community of finding gaps in our proficiency and then trying to fail in really safe environments. And really even in this kind of stressful exam environment, the point is to seek out failure when it's safe before you actually need to test your skills. That's why, for example, there's the opportunity to retest your rescue skills. So the idea is to actually seek out failure, find gaps in your proficiency, and really weed those things out so that when the real deal comes, we can be composed and really efficient. It's kind of the idea here. So let's dive into it. Before we get too deep though, we should probably talk about how do we even avoid this process in the first place. And this is probably a topic of discussion that we could cover for several evenings. But some of the notables, I think we all know these: trip planning, right? Having a good trip planning process, gathering weighty snowpack evidence. Anybody have an example of what weighty evidence would look like? Quick hint, it's not like, oh, there's already tracks, already got skied. That would be persuasive evidence. Yeah, digging pits, maybe some non-standard obs, like you've gone out and you've probed and you got a hardness profile of your little zone. You've been out in your specific zone every storm cycle, gathering observations. Personal and group awareness, very important. That kind of personal acuity and group acuity, like really knowing what's going on with yourself and with the others in your group. Maybe an advanced degree in psychology, right? We've dug deep into this in the last maybe 10 years, or really back to Ian McGammett when he introduced this social science concept of heuristics. But yeah, really knowing what's going on in terms of group or individual biases is really important. And we all bring biases to our daily lives. We could go bowling. I still think this town needs a bowling alley. It would be pretty sick. Good way to avoid avalanche hazard. And riding the ski area. This came up a couple days ago when I was out with a group of folks. A pretty experienced snowboarder, lives in the Tahoe area. He was discussing how important it is to have a ski pass. I don't know. I mean, I work for the ski area, so I guess I'm a little biased, but just that alone gives you an opportunity to get out in the mountains, get some exercise, but you're not so dependent on rolling into avalanche terrain all the time. Ultimately, right, this is kind of the idea, is we have to match our terrain selection with the hazard rating of the day, or the hazard rating that we, through weighty evidence gathering, have come up on our own for a little micro piece of terrain. And we're trying to build in margins, right? A margin of error that accommodates our group's vulnerability to avalanche hazard and our own risk tolerance as a group and as individuals. And I think this gets overlooked. And I think just a quick thing that we're starting to notice, the pendulum swinging super hard in these rec courses and even in pro courses, where you're observing these AM meetings, and people do a really good job with the psychology. So much so that if they feel good about how they've assessed their biases, they tighten their margins. And professionals and recreation level is kind of starting to do this. Like, we're good, like we're solid, we're aware of our group, we're aware of ourselves, we've like meditated together. And then they go out and ski some gnarly terrain that doesn't match the forecast. So ultimately, this is the fundamental. The terrain selection is really the only thing that we have control of, and really down to a micro level, like really having our terrain dialed. And that's where I think our particular mountain ranges really demands that we know our terrain like a tempestuous lover. And the French are really good at that. They don't use a whole lot of this like ECT 16. They have these like descriptors for wind direction and water and speed. And they know that the mountains will embrace them, but they will also slap them across the face. So they have this kind of very micro descriptions of terrain. I think that would be good for us to incorporate. Anyways, let's talk rescue. We don't have enough time to talk how to avoid it. Okay, so real quick, why do we need rescue skills? See if we can pull this up. Maybe. Oh, maybe not. Maybe switch screens.
Yeah, maybe swipe the 2 fingers on them.
I think
Here we are over here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and then just go.
Oh, now it's just changing the slide. Yeah, let's just exit.
Sorry, this is really very high tech of me.
We're outdoor folk. We're not computers.
You're doing great so far.
That might be the
There we go.
keys just to exit.
And then we'll click on it again. Perfect. Okay, so why do we need rescue skills? Because we do this sometimes. Push. Fuck, avalanche. Fuck. Okay, floating. Swimming. I'm good.
Oh my God. Oh. That is really crazy. Oh my God.
We're gonna fast forward ahead. You get the idea. We got to include some.
Oh.
All right. So we get the point there that that's a pretty helpless situation to find ourselves in. And we want to avoid it, obviously, at all costs. I think I got it here at the slideshow. Maybe. There we go. But yeah, I think one thing that you forget about until you end up in terrain and moving snow is that mountains are in control. And that's an almost immediate realization when we end up in terrain and moving snow. Like I'm helpless right now. I can't do anything. So we want to be prepared for this situation. See if I can get this to pop up.
That looks promising.
I think we got it. I just have to exit this.
You gotta save.
getting there. Didn't do good, very good job in the tech department here.
Depression.
Okay, here we go. So this is a example of a rescue progression. I don't know how to do though. How do I go big screen? There we go. There we go. Cool. Just as a caveat, some of these nuances will change as rescue consensus evolves over time.
Ah, t'as raison,
But
ouais.
this a pretty good
Partie des rochers
example
là-bas, non?
of rescue.
T'as
And it's
raison.
in French, so it's
Viens,
pretty
on va.
classic.
Ok, je m'occupe de la recherche. Anne, dès que tu as éteint ton DVA, tu t'éloignes de l'avalanche et tu t'appelles les secours. Dès que vous avez éteint vos DVA, vous sortez vos pelles et vous me rejoignez, ok?
Allô? Oui, il y a eu une avalanche. On est à Chamonix, dans le massif des Aiguilles Rouges, sous l'aiguille de la Floria en face sud. Ouais, il y en a qui sont partis en recherche, il y avait des indices de surface.
J'ai un signal! Dix! Venez par là! Vous enlevez vos skis ici! Il est là! Vous pouvez commencer à péler 2 mètres en dessous de moi, là, en dessous de mon bâton. Sur la sonde. Il est là. Ok, je marque. Et je vais chercher le deuxième. Il y en a un deuxième. Anne, viens avec ta sonde. Il est là.
Monsieur, vous m'entendez?
On a fait une avalanche.
Vous étiez combien exactement?
On était deux, c'est un copain.
Ouais.
Je sais pas où il était.
Mais ils sont deux! Écoute, c'est bon, je vais gérer. Ouais. Je vous laisse aller sur la deuxième.
I'm saying this is a real rescue. The background music is the same music we use on this French cooking show that I used to learn French when I was in there. Brings back good memories. Like deciding on a souffle and music's all intense.
Il respire toujours pas dans ce message. on a sorti 2 personnes. On a une personne qui est indemne et une autre qui avait un bouchon de neige dans la bouche. Elle est en arrêt respiratoire. Donc on a une personne qui a déjà fait qui est en train de faire un massage avec bouche à bouche.
Right, I think we get the point there. And as we're watching a few of these videos, maybe take mental notes of mental notes of some things that don't really line up, that don't make that much sense, right? These aren't like dogma ways of doing things. But most notably there, for us in the San Juans, is we don't really have easy access to helicopters necessarily. We need to plan for the potential for an extended extrication or maybe even an overnight type of scenario. I think in the Alps, their rescue kit is a cigarette and a cell phone. Call 112 is 911, smoke your cigarette, and the heli's there by the time you're done. We don't have that luxury. So that is a huge component of our kind of risk management strategy is what are we going to do to extricate and rescue. Get there. Cool. Well, yeah, that sets us up for the timed up. And I just need to go into nice over there. It's all right. There we go. Okay, swag break.
Ooh, nice.
So I don't know really, I mean, it's a small enough room. I think we could probably just whoever raised their hand first. But the question here is what weak layer grain type is relatively strong in compression and weak in shear? Who's got it?
Good swag, guys.
So I started with a really hard question.
I know, come on. Shout out answers.
It's been our avalanche problem, part of our avalanche problem type all winter pretty much. Depth 4. Good, I'll take depth 4.
Oh, yeah.
Depth 4.
Excellent. Here's a hat.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for Telluride Mountain Guides. There's some TMG hats, but I have trauma bomb from our friends at Tim's.
Nice.
Cool. So the idea of persistent grains, or depth 4 is an example of a persistent grain. They hold their shape, they resist erosion, fragmentation when they get squished, but you tilt them on angle and they shear really easily. So that affects our terrain selection with slope angle and also shape of the slope and also its connectivity, like what's it connected to. So if it's 20 degrees, but it's connected to a big gnarly 40-degree start zone, we've got a problem. And it also, persistent grains communicate energy really effectively. So if you stomp on that 20-degree slope at the base of the hill, that energy is going to communicate uphill unless it runs into subdivided terrain features that will stop it. So if it's connected to that start zone, you stomp here, the start zone is going to feel it. Anyways, that's a discussion for another time. Real quick, this split that took place in 2017 with Avalanche Education and kind of how we approach grappling with avalanche streams in 2017. Rec Track is geared towards avalanche skills, like skills you can incorporate into your personal habitude that make you less likely to encounter peril in avalanche terrain. The professional track is a big deviation from the way it used to be taught, and it's geared towards avalanche program operations. Like, how do you run an operation in a fashion that you can mitigate, reduce, or avoid your exposure to avalanche hazard? So it's a big deviation from the way we used to teach in the US. The Pro-1, which is what we're going to dive out into, and particularly the rescue exam, is aimed at avalanche workers, practitioners, people that are out in the field gathering observations and relaying that information back to the operations manager so that they can run an efficient operation. And it's an opportunity to demonstrate proficiency at a national standard. That's the idea here. But tonight, what we're trying to wean is what are some correlations or what are some takeaways from these professional exams that we can take into a recreational context. And you'll notice as we compare the statistics from these exams and then we watch real life scenarios, there's a lot of carryover from common mistakes and kind of places that people struggle with. I think we'll skip the video to save time. But here's the exam format. It's a 50 meter by 50 meter simple terrain, typically, maybe verging on challenging terrain. But it's a 50 by 50 meter slide path. It doesn't have to be a real slide path. The beacons are approximately 1 meter deep. There's 2 of them. They need to be brought to the surface in less than 7 minutes. It's a pass fail. So your technique is not included in your passing grade. You can have terrible technique and have a really fast time. That's one thing that we'll talk about. And you get an opportunity to retest. So it sounds, I mean, it's kind of easy, but not really. It's pretty stressful. The reason the retest is incorporated with this exam, we want to stay true to that idea that you have an opportunity to fail, and we want people to push themselves to failure and then have a chance to improve. But it is super stressful because if you fail twice, your course is over. So people get pretty stressed out, and we'll see in the statistics that, stress is there. Let's just watch just a little bit of this. Okay, so this has some good stuff.
Of the ball field. To keep the exam consistent across venues, the search area will be in simple terrain. There could be scattered trees or small gullies, but the exam principle is to keep the terrain pretty easy.
Perhaps the
50 by 50
point of
meter
this is
exam
something you could set up
you may
with
start
your
off with a signal,
touring
or
partners.
you may need to do a signal search
and,
to
you
pick
know, add
up
a little
the first
stress.
transceiver.
And
By including the signal search
you can
in
do
your
this
rescue
exam pretty
practice,
much anywhere.
you will be ready for either situation. Here's what your success might look like.
40, 35, 27, 19, 15, 12, 7, 6.8, 5.6, 4.3, 3, 2.6, 1.6, 1.3, 1.1, 1.3, 1.0, 1.1, 1.0, 1.4. I'm going to probe here.
might need that hat later. Think about it. Especially if you spend the night outside.
Okay.
can see we're 4 minutes in. You might imagine if you're in this individual's shoes, it probably has felt like an eternity at this point. This is Margaret Wheeler, so she's pretty solid on her game, really solid. So she's probably not super stressed, but in this situation, that 4 minutes feels like, 12. But you can see how she's maintaining composure and keeping her gear together. So you guys get the point. This is pretty tidy and neat.
13. 9.8.
Maybe a little too tidy. Is it always this tidy and neat? Probably not, right? So we're going to dive into a couple real scenarios. This is a little, it's kind of gut wrenching, just as a warning what we're going to see. It's not like morbid or anything, but just be prepared for that. We're not really here to judge these people, right? Like I've even made this mistake, to tell you the truth. We're just trying to get some takeaways.
Unit! 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 No!
Maybe take some mental notes of things that people are doing as they initiate their search.
Appelle les secours, je me mets en recherche! Appelle les secours! J'ai un signal! J'ai un signal! On drop! Mec, on va sortir de là! Ouais. Et toi, si jamais tu le rallumes, si j'ai rien.
Picked up his buddy
Appelle les
first.
Nico, hein! Lec, on est là, Lec! C'est bon, il est là! On y va! Lec, je vais te sauver, je te promets! Je te le promets, Lec, on est là! J'ai un 7. Sors tout. Je. Ok. Lec, on est là! On t'aime! Allez, on y va! On est là, Lec! Je. Tu vois sa tête ou pas? Lec, tu m'entends? Calme-toi! Tu parles pas, Lec! Okay. Lec, tu restes calme! Reste calme, Lec! Lec, tu restes calme! Reste calme, Lec! Allez, Lec! Reste calme! Reste calme, Lec! On est en train de trouver là, ça marche. Il est tout. Lec! J'arrive pas.
That's Lake.
Lec, tu nous entends? Lec, ça va? T'arrives à toucher la main? Putain! Allez, les gars! Lec! Ah, Lec, reste calme. Même si tu nous entends, reste calme. Enlève la bouche. Ah, il bouge. Je vais bouger. Ça va, Lec? Dis-moi juste quelque chose. Ça va? Réponds-moi. Réponds-moi. L'hélico, il arrive. Tout est bon, mec. L'hélico, il est là. L'hélico, il est là. Tu restes avec moi, ok? Oui, restez.
On fait une plateforme devant nous là.
Reste là.
T'es prêt?
Oui,
D'accord?
restez là.
Maybe consider how helicopters are a big part of the rescue strategy here, right? It's kind of reckless abandon. And that's probably a good thing because that heli's right there. But our strategy might be a little different. Oh, that's not good play. Try another one. There's a bunch. We don't need to watch all of them. That is a good one. The drop this. This one's pretty shaky in terms of the footage, but this is pretty intense and really good. Some good takeaways. There's some terrain shapes similar to what we see in Bear Creek, except for a really broad apron. This is in Italy.
Way too black. Rubbing.
Still sounds like kind of got big crystallized.
Be careful, Tony.
We have some terrain configurations like this in our complex avalanche terrains. Notable. Looks kind of San Juan-ish, minus the big apron at the bottom.
No. Uh-oh.
See the clock starts up there. We we don't get these favorable runouts, right? The San Juan's not typically, that looks kind of like the frying pan at Bear Creek.
It's a lot like you took it.
Yeah.
Tommy! I can't find help!
So he just started his beacon search.
Tommy! What's it? Let's move!
Both gloves off.
What's the Alpha? Come on!
He's picking up his buddy at this point. That's the second one we've seen of those. Which makes sense. His buddy who's above the surface. All right, this is a little painful. We'll skip ahead. We're 8-9 minutes in at this point.
Where is that? Hey, down. Huh?
You got one guy digging with his hands.
Yeah, down, no, yeah. Keep over there.
At this point, they can see his arm.
Hold on. Adan, hey, Adan, Hussein, Adan, hey, Adan, respira, hey, vale, ve, tío, Adan, ve, respira, no fallo, tío, Adan.
Do you guys feel like that's confirmed patent airway? He's breathing? Probably not, huh? Yeah. So they kind of go to this conversation when they could be working right here, right? We're not judging. This is obviously pretty intense. It's hard to be rational, but his airway is not patent at this point. And they're just kind of like, I don't know what this guy's doing back. He's like digging his feet up. Again, not trying to be judgmental. Okay. Enough takeaways here. And then the helicopter comes. I don't know. I think there's like kind of a mellower off-piste zone near this that is probably a bystander that filmed it. All right. One more. Go. Okay, one more.
What does that mean?
Like, come on, you guys.
Sa
Come
caméra
on,
va
buddy.
filmer des images exceptionnelles d'une rare violence.
But in the plural, yes. Come on, you guys. Oh, geez.
Pour le moment,
Sorry, I
les
forget.
conditions paraissent idéales.
That's right. I have it dialed. It must have pushed something out.
Quand tout à coup,
Yeah, that's it. That's what we have to do last time. Thanks for your patience. Sorry, I'm not a tech wizard. I minimize this. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Just exit it. Just exit this one. Let's just try this. Interesting. Had it all out.
sa caméra va filmer des images.
Sorry, team.
Florent se fait prendre dans une avalanche. Au passage de ses skis, il déclenche tout autour de lui. C'est idéal. Quand tout à coup, Florent se fait prendre dans une avalanche. Au passage de ses skis, il déclenche tout autour de lui la cassure d'une plaque de plusieurs centaines de mètres. Il saute un rocher, atterrit sur la neige qui se dérobe. Toujours debout,
Solid
il
for a
tente de
skier, he
sortir de
stops the
l'avalanche
landing.
quand devant lui, une vague de neige de 3 mètres de haut le catapulte en l'air. Sur le dos, Florent ne peut plus rien faire. Il se fait traîner sur plusieurs dizaines de mètres, puis ensevelir.
So this happened
Son
right
premier réflexe est de
outside the
vouloir
ski
se
area,
dégager,
Marybelle,
mais sous
ski
1,20 m de
area,
neige,
and the Trois
il
Vallées.
ne peut plus bouger, il est emprisonné.
So you had a whole rescue
À cet
team
instant, Florent
above
sait que
this
sa
point
survie ne dépend plus de lui.
witnessing this avalanche.
Il se calme
Is this the
pour
flashing
économiser
red
ses
light
forces
on his
en attendant les
GoPro?
secours qui viennent
GoPro.
derrière.
Wow.
That's crazy. I'm like, what's that?
À chaque minute qui passe, les chances de survie de Florent s'amoindrissent. Grâce à sa caméra, nous allons vous raconter l'histoire de cet incroyable sauvetage. Son ami Adrien et les pisteurs ont démarré les recherches. Enseveli, Florent est en train de s'asphyxier. Après 8 longues minutes, sa caméra embarquée enregistre les sons des secouristes au-dessus de lui.
Who can
Ils ont
translate for
réussi à
us?
localiser Florent.
They're
Il
here.
commence à pelleter la neige qui l'emprisonne,
Come on, guys.
avec l'angoisse de le retrouver mort.
Again. Here, here. Au bout d'1 minute 30 d'effort, les secouristes
2
parviennent
minutes
à
and
dégager
24 seconds.
la tête de Florent.
And he's out. You can see how these guys are working on his airway, getting his chest wall unencumbered.
His arms out.
Yeah.
Voilà, il respire partiellement, je dois te descendre aux deux.
Florent respire difficilement et il est inconscient.
Hey.
Les pisteurs le
You did
mettent
it.
directement sous oxygène.
Allez, t'es sorti, respire. Respire. Ici, allez, on dégage. On dégage. Encore, pas. Regarde-moi. Bon, un peu sur le côté, on va.
Celui qui encourage Florent depuis le début,
Attention.
c'est Pierrot, un pisteur secouriste de 34 ans.
Ah, mec, c'est bon.
Avec ses collègues de Méribel-Motaret et Adrien, ils sortent enfin Florent. Au bout de 5 longues minutes, grâce à l'apport d'oxygène, la victime ouvre les yeux et reprend.
So a few things there that were pretty advantageous for that individual. Probably fitness, right? Skiing ability may or may not have helped there, but you can see how strong of a skier that individual was to
Aucune
like
lésion neurologique.
probably going 60 miles an hour at the bottom of the path. But what was most notable is the crew resource management component. He had a crew of professional patrollers that were uphill of him. They were equipped and they had a last point scene. They watched this whole thing happen. So that's everything that could possibly be, right in that wrong situation happened for this guy. That's notable. Okay, swag break. This is they should have done more of these. What is a signal search pattern? Who's got one?
Raise your hand.
Zigzag,
Zigzag?
right?
Yep. And then how is it defined?
By the range of your beacon.
Right? And is that the range as it comes out of the box or as the techie shop person sold it to you with? Boom. Test it. So it's your known range with a built-in buffer. So let's say it comes out of the box with like 70 meters range. You go out and test it consistently in the field, and then you build a buffer. So let's say you edge that down to like 50 meters is my known, or 50 arbitrary units. Actually, they're not exact units of measure. And then you build in a buffer. So you say 40. So let's say 40 units is your known range, established range. That allows you to set your signal search pattern so you don't have to go all the way to the edge of the slide path, right? With every zig and zag. You can build in a buffer that's going to make it more efficient. Trauma ball. Boom.
Oh, nice.
Caught it.
Done.
Cool. So signal search pattern and practicing that with your beacon is really, really valuable. Okay, let's get into it. These are the results from the 50 exams divided into gear management, technique, and time.
Mhm. Wow.
So 2 out of 50 complete yard sale,
Wow.
and they passed. And as we saw in these videos, right, there were some complete yard sales. One of them that we couldn't play, but successful recovery. But what's the caveat that we keep bringing up here in the San Juans?
Survival.
Survival, right? Just because we get them out of the snow, we might have to survive the night in our zone. I mean, helicopters are definitely getting more reliable, but we have to work that in. We have to bake it into our rescue strategy, the extrication and transport of that individual, right? So we may not be able to afford a complete yard sale. 1 out of 50 dropped their probe. This is a very notable owner of a beacon company. And it was really cool of him to take this Pro-1 in Rocky Mountain National Park. He set aside his ego and he went for it. We picked a test site that was like arguably challenging terrain. It was steep enough. His probe slid away from him. And he immediately looked at all the youngsters in the course and he said, "Who do you think you're dealing with?" And he pulled out another probe. And he had actually the fastest time, but his technique was variable.
Yeah.
He did not incorporate a signal search pattern, but he crushed it. 3 out of 50 had a broken probe. I'm glad they're not making carbon fiber probes anymore. I had an embarrassing impromptu beacon search with Pi one time at the ski area, and I was at that point in my life very intrigued with light equipment. For some reason, I had a carbon fiber probe, but I broke it, and Pi was not impressed with my search, and he shouldn't have been. And he told me, which was good. 28 out of 50 took off one glove and kept it off the entire search. 16 out of 50 took off both gloves. 4 out of 50 lost one glove. And let's think about that. If we're doing a night rescue, how functional are you going to be without a glove? Right? I can't even like scrape my windshield when my hands freeze. So that's something to think about. 2 out of 50 lost both gloves. 3 out of 50 lost their hat. 4 out of 50 lost sunnies or goggles. Those could be useful, especially if it's stormy. 17 out of 50 left skis at the first beacon. That may or may not be a bad strategy, depending on the debris, but something to think about. 6 out of 50 left their pack at the first beacon. And we saw that in that Italian search. One of the guys left his pack, so he was digging with his hands. 3 out of 50 lost or abandoned their shovel handle. And so they were just digging with kind of in hand mode. 6 out of 50 lost one or both poles. I mean, what could poles be useful for? Splinting, rescue sled, pushing if you're dragging somebody out. 4 out of 50 took 30 seconds or more to get out of their dinafadiddles.
Oh no.
Which is notable because we're usually in dinafits, most, not always, but often. So getting good at getting in and out of your dinafits. Or now they're not dinafits anymore, right? It's the patent wore out. 6 out of 50 were split borders. This is not a judgment. It's just something to think about. And 2 out of those 6 were in downhill mode for the search. And 4 out of 6 were in split mode. And that was, it's fueler's choice. All right, technique. 26 out of 50 used a signal search pattern that was too wide. It was too broad. They went to the edge of the path. 13 out of 50 were too narrow. 1 out of 50 was right down the middle. We talked about this individual. 16 out of 50 clicked out before 10 distance units. 2 out of 50 immediately clicked out. 17 did not complete the pinpoint search at standard. So they didn't get a lowest reading. 38 had no definable probe pattern. And probing is probably the most consistent thing that people rush or don't use good technique with. 32 out of 50 pepper probed, where they probe the same spot multiple times. So this is just 1 meter deep. It's a relatively shallow burial. You can imagine how much time you're going to take if it's deeper than that, and you keep probing the same spot because you're like, they're right here. I know they're right here, right? Generally, most rescue standards are advising a 25 centimeter box grid. It used to be a spiral grid, or probably bounce to some other shape in the future based on some brilliant math person. But the idea is to have a definable pattern and trust it. And the idea with 25 cms is if somebody's buried sideways, that's roughly the width, unless they have like a daddy beer gut. That's roughly the width of somebody buried sideways. And trust that pattern, and you're going to be way more efficient. 20 out of 50 just called a strike and started digging. Didn't actually get a strike. Let's see, 17. The false strike was the 20 out of 50, and 17 out of 50 just started digging. They didn't even call a strike. Which is fair enough. I mean, that's a strategy, but maybe not the best idea, right? If you're just slightly off, if you don't have a strike, you're going to waste a lot of time digging. Digging technique, 35. That's a big percentage. 35 out of 50 used a really inefficient digging technique. What are some examples of inefficient digging?
Straight down the probe.
Yep, not stepping back from your probe, so you're tunneling. Any landscapers in here know what happens when your hole starts to backfill. Really frustrating. A lot of commonalities when people are amped up is they grab snow and they stand up and then they throw it. Right? Like, look at all the waste there. Standing up, throwing. We're going for an airway, right? So every second counts. So practicing digging technique is something that, I mean, nobody wants to spend time doing that, but maybe you could incorporate it while digging out your driveway or your car. 19 out of 50 voiced something along the lines with, I already failed. And they had not. They were like, a lot of people were like 2 minutes in and they're like, oh, I'm way over time. So the clock starts to tick. And I think the idea there is don't give up. There's no reason to give up.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
With the search patterns, I think earlier you said like the zone for the test is 50 meters wide. So if you go right down the middle of that, you can pick up 25 meters on both sides.
The argument there is that this individual didn't build in margins. And we argued about it over beers, and this is somebody who's built his living on beacons, so he's definitely willing to have the argument. It was great. It was like fun and playful. But the idea was not quite enough of a margin. That's maybe trusted in your known range a little too much. But that's going to be a game time decision. It's probably you incorporated that equation, like how reliable is your last point seen? How well defined are the flanks of the slide path? Right? Do you have like debris piles out on the side, or is it just like flanks, bed surface, debris pile at the bottom? Right? And that's where having these skills engraved, you're going to be able to make that game time decision and adapt. So time, 3 out of 50 were below 4 minutes, and that's fully recovered. So it's pretty fast time, not just probing, but digging them all up. But only 1 out of 3 of those sub 4 minutes had what would be considered at standard technique. So 2 out of those 3 sub 4 had technique that was below standard, technique that would not be consistent over time to produce a desirable result. So 31 out of those 50 were sub 5 minutes. And all of those people had really good technique. So there may be a takeaway there. Backing off your time just a little bit or sacrificing just a little bit of the time for good technique may prove to be a better habit over time. But that's arguable. 2 out of 50 failed their first, and those 2 passed on their second. Swag break. All right, so this is tricky, and this one could go a little back and forth. But what 2 bits of weather data or information tell us the most about stress on snowpack structure? Temps, I could buy that in the springtime.
Wind loading.
Wind. What else?
Snowfall.
Precip, but how do we typically measure? What's the most accurate measure of snow water? Sweet, boom, nailed it. So a lot of my old mentors in my early 20s working in Montana, they would say, give me wind, give me water, and I can tell you what your problem is. So they were willing to tell me what my problem was, and also what the snowpack's problem was. So sweet. I think we got a couple of people got this precip. And who else threw out? Temp. I think temps is good for springtime. And that's really solar input into the snowpack. How much radiation from the sun is the snowpack absorber. All right. If we have enough time. Yeah, we'll just move on to just the video. I was going to tell a really embarrassing story about myself, where my brother saved my ass when I was like 26. Long story short, I was 8 years into a glorious career of pissing my life away as a ski patroller and a guide. And I thought I knew everything. And then my brother dug me up out of a pile of snow. And his first words to me were, I should probably go earmuffs. He used foul language, but he told me I was an idiot. But then I got him back like 2 years later. I saved his ass. So anyways, I guess the point being there is, first of all, I should embarrass myself because I shouldn't be up here showing all these videos of people making mistakes. And as I'm examining, you know, yeah, we all, like, I've made multitudes of mistakes. And I think the other takeaway from that story is that there are certain inflection points in your career as a professional, and then also just as you're in your, you know, progression in this lifelong art of being a backcountry traveler, where you're really vulnerable. And really the only people that can keep you from that vulnerability, unless you're super self-aware, are mentors. People that can tell you, like, you're about to screw up, like this is about to get real. So seeking those people out and then building room for that in our community and being okay with that harsh feedback sometimes, I think can be really valuable. And my older brother was never afraid to give me harsh feedback, but unfortunately it took until like my late 30s before I even processed it. So this is a really good video from the really talented Telluride local.
Would there be a way to share the video or your slides later with folks if you wanted to, if you don't get to
Totally.
cover all of these today?
Yeah.
Cool.
This is, yeah, I think we can get it. Sorry. Let me get that to click. Maybe I'm just not clicking.
No, you got the right click. Let's see.
Right. Let's try it this way. Nailed it.
Except now it's not there.
Yep. Pause that first.
Do the old,
Oh, well,
it's crazy. There's like multiple screens happening.
I'm in the back world now.
A handful of us went up double patrol in the dark to make it to the ridge for sunrise. And we were just kind of warming up and shooting some fun, mellow patterns. You know, that was kind of the main agenda for the day. Just have fun and do some free riding. Nothing crazy.
Beautiful morning. Seemed like everything was a green light.
Telluride local.
We all rode one line each. We all dropped in off the ridge. Nick, Jimmy, Marissa, and myself, our lines ended a little bit higher up, and we wanted to walk around and look to where we were going to ride next.
Basically, as soon as we got to the bottom of the first initial pitch, we heard Weaver over the radio that he was getting ready to drop in. So I was able to get out my camera and film him, and the four of us had eyes on him as he dropped in. Oh, big apple, get on the radio. It was about his second or third turn below the convex roll where we saw the whole slope just fracture and propagate across the entire face. And that was when I put my phone away and yelled Avalanche.
Nick and I are immediately running uphill because we could, you know, the slide, it didn't travel very far. The slope released and it kind of came down, and Weaver went through a little chute into a depression right under the slope.
At this point, I just remember screaming saying, does anyone see him? Does anyone see him? That realization that no one saw him is just a feeling I'll never forget. It gives me goosebumps right now, even just talking about it. Just replays over and over in my head. Just, no one fucking sees him.
There's this brief moment when an accident goes down where you're waiting for your friend to yell and let you know that they're okay. But when that moment comes and goes, you know that it's a pretty serious situation and every second matters. So you kind of gain this inner fire that you never knew that you had.
I see Nick and Harry start moving fast uphill, as well as Jimmy, and I'm going as fast as I can go, and on a split board trying to sprint is like so slow. I felt like I couldn't move fast enough to get up there.
I remember just being so exhausted, just being so upset with my body that I couldn't run faster, on the verge of feeling like I was going to puke, and just still did not feel fast enough how fast we were running uphill.
It being so surreal that you just all of a sudden couldn't see your friend anymore. It's like my mind just couldn't really grasp that. But it was just weird that my mind kept pulling out to be like, I can't believe this is actually happening. I can't see my friend anymore. So at that point, we're on the radio, also just like trying to guide Andrew down.
I was at the top. I remember being concerned and calling down about, the potential for hang fire and creating a secondary slide. I was extremely worried about that, and we made the call and decision that if I took a similar route to one of the lines to get into the bed surface as quick as I could, that would be safe and appropriate in order for me to start the rescue. I saw Nick Russell down there, and he had a 20 or a 15, like a significantly lower number than I did.
And I was able to lock on a signal pretty early on from about 30 meters out that basically just led me right to him. Harry was right behind me and had a probe.
I mean, I don't even know if we even said anything. I just threw my probe.
Probe at Nick. Nick grabbed it, 1 or 2 hits, boom, hit Weaver.
And within the second strike, I had him.
And I just threw my pack down and got my shovel out and just started digging.
I was, I think, 1 or 2 shovels, and I immediately got his bindings.
So we're on him, and now we're trying to find his airway, so everybody's moving downhill.
He was head down. His head was probably anywhere from 2.5, 3 feet down, and his hands were trapped behind his back, and his backpack, his heavy camera pack, was kind of up and over his head.
We freed up his arms, but his head was still the deepest part of the snow. At that point, we had to switch out shovelers to get some fresh hands in there. I remember holding his hand, screaming to him, letting him know that we were there. We were working as hard as we can to get him. And still, obviously hits me hard. I just remember his arm going up in my hand.
Just started digging, like adrenaline is through the roof.
Eventually, he just kind of gets this tunnel light thing, and he just goes black.
Right. Airway.
Eventually got to his head and his airway, and then we whacked him in the face with the shovel trying to get him, which caused him to bleed, and there was some blood all over the place. But then he was just like, ah! like talking and like, I'm okay. And then we all collectively could just take a breath. And I remember just saying, like, all right, everyone just chill, like slow down. We got him.
As we were able to flip him over onto his back, Weaver was conscious, talking the whole time, and clearly okay. And it was just a miracle. I can't even put into words how happy I was when I saw that, when I heard him talking.
Basically, I just remember all of a sudden just kind of waking up, and my there was I could see actually some blood dripping down, and I didn't really care. Everything went from really good to really bad in a matter of seconds, and you don't really know which way's up or down. You get little glimpses of blue sky, then you just get getting tossed around. It's very similar to going over the falls in a wave. it's just a total mess, really. Debris just came down and just took my feet out from underneath me, and kind of took me down through this chute. It just kind of pushes on top of you, and it just starts to just push you down. And at one point, I used literally all my strength and screamed and tried with every ounce of strength in my body, and I could not move at all. I was just so happy that I was alive, and I just remember telling everybody that I loved them, and I just was so thankful that they came to my rescue.
Looking back on the accident now, my biggest takeaway is simply that the mountains can be unpredictable. We put in all of this work trying to figure out how to be as safe as possible.
Wind slabs were the primary concern that day. We had no red flags observed, no red flags, anything during that day or any of the lines that we rode. After kind of investigating a little bit and digging some pits around the area, we believed that the slide broke on a difficult and isolated layer it was hard to detect. The next day, the Sierra Avalanche Center guys came out. We talked to them about it. They had a difficult time finding exactly like these. We were expecting us or them or whoever to find this like massive red flag of like, oh yeah, that is a definitive like no go, and no one really found that. It was this weird kind of isolated layer from maybe some fog just sitting in this little valley that created some surface horror, or it's kind of hard to say, and I don't think no one will have a definitive answer of why this exactly happened. And so it just goes to show that accidents are going to happen in the mountains, and you just have to be prepared for when that happens and know exactly what to do.
Because if something bad happens, obviously you miss some signs, no matter how insignificant something seemed, like, we missed something because something bad happened.
One of the mistakes that our crew made was not doing a beacon check in the morning. Luckily, we're all experienced enough that we all on our own turned our beacons on. But as far as I know, none of us turned to one another and said, hey, is your beacon on? Hey, is your beacon on? And we didn't do a check, and that is no standard by any means. Should any group ever go out without doing some type of beacon check?
So people were pretty frothy, and it seemed like we had space to be really excited. And so despite that, you're still in avalanche terrain. The risk is always there. So no matter how green the lights are, you still gotta be able to step back and look at it with a clear frame of mind, I would say, and recognize the danger no matter how mellow it seems it's going to be.
We locked out with having 4 people at the bottom that were already in split mode and ready to walk uphill. And we also had Andrew at the top who was strapped in.
If those 4 hadn't been in skin mode, ready to travel uphill, this entire rescue would have fallen on one person, Andrew, who was at the top of the slope, who would have been the only person to be able to get to me fast enough. And so if it had been a one-person rescue, it would have added, at least another 2 or 3 minutes on there. And they were able to recover me within 4 minutes.
We had, 5 people digging in on him, and we just barely got to him when he passed out. And so if that was just on me by myself and knowing like how gassed I was digging, and not have that help to people to come in, I don't think it would have taken me maybe double the time to get to him, and who knows what the outcome would have been. And so that's a really scary thought that still haunts me to this day.
I think we had great communication that day, but I think we always, there always can be more communication. Just planning out what everyone's doing, where everyone's going.
Just be ready to go if something happens. You have to treat every line and scenario, no matter what the AVI report is, like there's a slide's gonna happen. So you pick your safe spots, have proper communication, have your radios on. If we didn't have radios, it would have been so hard to communicate about what was going on. Every person had a radio.
As far as advice goes for anybody going out, practice so much. You want these scenarios drilled into your brain. I think that was a huge part also why our rescue was as successful and quick as it was.
Biggest advice I have to say is take an avalanche course, and continue your education. Don't just take one and think you know everything. It's a constant learning curve. You're learning through experience and through friends, and you just need to keep up with that every year. Keep on learning. Don't be scared to learn more.
The reason you train so much is when it does happen, there's a click in your brain, and you go in straight into rescue mode of like, I know what to do. Everyone with me knows what to do, and you get it done. Having this knowledge and training, will save someone's life. In this case, it's saved our friend's life, 100% without question.
I'm super happy to be alive. I'm super thankful for the crew that I was with that day. And I really hope that this video can shed some light on just how unpredictable the backcountry can be and how you need to be prepared for anything that happens.
Sweet. So we can grab some takeaways from all of this information. Really good stuff from that crew there. One of the kind of conceptual frameworks that we incorporate into the professional realm is this idea of identify, analyze, and evaluate. And the real down and dirty of that is just this kind of you don't always want to say boredom, right? But how about pre-mistaken? Right? In medicine, we look at pre-mortem type of things that can help us spread into
You just watch these videos all night.
I know it's kind of.
I imagine that's what you did.
I don't have much free time, but it's this idea of pre-mortem or pre-mistake curiosity and imagination. Sometimes in avalanche terrain, it's really hard to incorporate these things because we don't see the dragon breathe fire very often. But in the surfing realm, in the whitewater realm, the dragon is always typically breathing some kind of fire. So it's easier to incorporate these pre-mortem or pre-mistakem skills. But in avalanche terrain, using this idea of what could go wrong? How bad could it be? What do we do now? Those are kind of three really good pre-mortem skills. And like these guys and gals in that last video, whether they discussed it or not, they were in a good position to address what do we do now. And maybe they didn't communicate that, but they had those pieces in place. So using those kind of strategies, approaching a single slide path, what could go wrong? How bad could it be? What do we do now? And then put those pieces of crew resource management in place so that if it does happen, you've got safety set. People are putting their skins on. You've left one gal or guy out of the gorge, as it were, or outside of the surf break on the jet ski, right? So leaving somebody out of harm's way in a position of response, that worked super well for those guys. Whatever the case, that conceptual tool is really useful. What could go wrong? How bad could it be? What do we do now? Some general takeaways. Anybody have anything just from all this information that they think is a worthy takeaway? And we have a prize. Anybody? Anything at all from like gear management to technique to?
I feel like we're always standing as a group watching every skier come down, and the fact that they transitioned and have their skins on unique to me. It's not typically my experience, but it's definitely something I would get from it.
Yeah. Did you already get one of these?
I didn't.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that hits on the value of the last point seen. In the story of my brother saving me, he cut his time like more than in half because he had a last point seen. He came right to me. Overarching, take homes here is that these skills are perishable. You heard the folks in that video giving that feedback. Practice your skills, they go away. You lose that muscle memory over time. Just like, you forget how to play badminton, even though you played it once before. You're not going to win a tournament unless you practice. Build these skills in a stressful practice environment. Add some stress to the system and be okay with failure. And that's something I struggled with throughout, 20s, 30s, even now in my 40s, is just, it's okay to fail. Seek out failure and be okay with it. Fail before it matters, because you don't want to fail when it matters. So create stressful environments with your touring partners and be okay with making mistakes in front of them.
Something I think is so cool that you would kind of have to practice with stress is like communicating out loud while you're doing all of this stuff, because obviously that first video we watched with the French folks, and they're doing such a good job, like you the leader and like communicating, like you go here and you go here. That's so hard to do in like a chaotic and scary environment. So if you practice being like, here's what I'm hearing, here's what you're doing, you go do this, I'm gonna do this, somebody get a probe out, like that's so hard to do when you're stressed out, but so critical.
Yeah, and your nice French goggles are gonna be all fogged up. You're not gonna be like, oui, yes, oui.
Right.
Call a helicopter.
Right, like you can just done.
Okay, we're hitting on a lot of this stuff. Muscle memory, right? Technique, fast response, essential. I think this is a big one. Just when it comes down to it, we're trying to get an open airway. We're trying to free up the chest wall. And like we saw in a lot of these videos, it's easier said than done. But you don't really want to stop working until that's the case. Yes.
I just think, yeah, you're so right about that, and seeing all the folks starting to ask questions of the buried individual before they even fully uncovered them. And here in like the San Juans, we deal with so much trauma. So a lot of those videos were above tree line where, the airway was the main concern. And I'm thinking like that person, if we don't dig them out quickly, they could bleed out in that pit. So even if you get to their face and you're like, oh, their mouth is open, you don't know the full story of what's happening with them under the snow. And so that trauma mindset of skiing around trees and being in Colorado where it's rocky, I think that's something to really take home.
Yeah, maybe add to that it, like a head to toe survey. We want to be able to assess that as soon as possible. We want access to the ABCs first, but we really need to get a complete head to toe survey before we're like, yeah, let's wait for the helicopter.
Would it make sense to consider for pro that you also require at least a workup cert, some level of loading first aid?
Yep, and that they catch that later on in their kind of proficiency track. So the Pro-1 can only assess so much, but the medical component definitely is along like any avalanche worker's professional track for sure. And that's a huge component. I think the baseline proficiency, they could add more stuff to it for sure, I think. But it's a relatively new deal. Anybody else? Takeaways? I have more prizes.
I remember a point about most of the folks that were under 4 minutes, 2 of 3 had below standard technique. Was a good one. Is you definitely want to get someone out as quickly as possible, but you want to balance staying in control and managing stress.
Totally, and I think that's a good one for the way we practice, because certainly if you pull that off in real life, great. Nobody cares about how good your technique was if you pull it off. But if we're trying to build these skills into our muscle memory, it's good to have good technique. I think of, my wife is a ski racer, grew up as a ski racer. And when things get sketchy, her technique gets better. And the reason that's the case is because she had a ski coach, like, her feet were like bound into ski boots when she was like 1 year old. But she had a ski coach just like engraving that technique so that when things get harder, her technique gets better. Me, being kind of like a hack, learn on my own skier, sometimes when things get hard, my technique goes out the window. So the idea is practice that good technique so that when things get real, you got it.
I think also people have.
Sorry, I caused trauma with the trauma ball.
I think people have a way of gaming, exercises you can turn into a game, right? So it's Beacon Basin or a 50 by 50 drill, like, people can figure out how to optimize their technique for that specific search. And like, as a result, in Beacon Basin, you see a lot of really bad probing technique because people get right on top of that target and go boom, boom, strike, and that it kind of creates a false sense of confidence that you've mastered a skill, which you have, which is you kind of beat the game.
Yeah.
And so like you want to, when you do it, think about, okay, what if this is a much deeper burial? And maybe just give yourself, like, say, okay, like, I'm not going to pinpoint it this time. I'm going to give myself 1.5 meters to probe it and build it on that technique.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nearly a quantum number of scenarios we could find ourselves in an avalanche rescue. Maybe not quantum. There's mathematicians in here, but you can think of, there's just millions of different ways you could find yourself executing a rescue. So like Tuck's getting at, beat the game, but then change the game as you practice. I got 2 more prizes. Anybody got anything? We'll just throw them in the air. Yes.
I didn't really get into it that much, but don't assume that there's just one. Like in the French one, the first one that we watched, they immediately kept going for a second because they didn't see the incidents. They didn't know.
Totally. Yeah, clearing the debris. You want camo or Rasta? Rasta. Camo. Got one more. Who's got a closer?
I think the gear management is really poignant because if you lose a glove as a rescuer, you create a second victim overnight possibly.
Yeah.
That's just no fun.
Yeah.
Leaving the packs at the strike point. Having the wherewithal to bring all your dirt with you all the time, keep it together. That's
Totally. Yeah, I think that resonates here in our mountain range.
I got one.
Anybody else? Big hat. You want a hat? Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks you guys. Just food for thought, and yeah, I think we're probably segueing into maybe some near misses for the next one.
That's a great segue. Everyone give it up for Ryan. Awesome. So the next Pi Fund Abby Chat or Backcountry Chat is happening in February, and the theme is going to be near misses. So if you know someone who has been involved in a near miss, we've got several people in mind, but obviously we want to open the floor to anybody who's interested. And if you've ever been to one of these in the past, this is the first DC chat I ever went to in Telluride. Was a near miss chat, and it was the most impactful on me as a young new backcountry skier in Telluride. So stay tuned for that. I believe the date is February 17th. February 17th. So stay tuned for more info on that. And yeah, we'll have a variety of speakers sharing their stories, and that's always like, it's heavy, but it hits home, and especially going into the spring, it's the best time to think about all that. All right, my final question for you all is raise your hand if you have done avalanche rescue or practice it this winter. Done it in real life or practice. How about that? Hopefully mostly practice. Those of you who aren't raising your hands, go out there, have some fun with it. Like, you can make it a game. We've got this awesome Beacon Basin at our disposal, and stay tuned for some Pi Fun facilitation days down there in the Beacon Basin. The last thing I want to say before y'all go is, well, actually 2 things. One, if you are new here, new to Telluride, raise your hand. We got a few people raising their hand in jest maybe. But hey, if you're new here and you are looking for a backcountry partner, stick around, come on up front. I'd love to facilitate a little like meet and greet for folks who just need someone to get out there with and practice these skills. We're really lucky to have Lizard Head Pass, which is a relatively safe area out of avalanche terrain. If you avoid blackface, where you can go and tour with someone, get to know them a little bit better, and then eventually maybe go into different parts of the backcountry around Telluride. So if you're new here or looking for partners, come on up front after this. And then the last thing is, Joanna, can you just point to that thing next to you on the table? Does anyone know what that is? That is a howitzer shell. So the howitzer is what we blast the slopes with on the Telluride Ski Resort. That's what Pi love to do, shooting howitzer shells into the mountains. So I hear. If you all are so willing and kind to support the Pi Fund, we really appreciate it. As you're walking out the door, feel free to toss a little donation in the howitzer shell. There's also some San Juan Snowcast stickers out in the back and some pamphlets for avalanche courses going on around the area and other events coming up here at the library. So thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. Feel free to grab a beer and mingle a little bit. And come 8:15, we'll all try and be out the door to make Joanna's life a little bit easier.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you all. Yeah, you have it. It's it. Awesome. Okay, think about your story and then.
Do you want to
Okay.
share it? We can share it with you first sometime.
That would be good. Yeah, maybe I'll love to hear it.
Okay.
And I think I'd love to get a variety of incidents and things to talk about. So thanks for that. That'd be awesome. I'd love to hear the story.
Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah, Sam, how's it going, man? How's Opus life treating you?
It's good. It's good. It's hard.
Hard work.
Yeah, but I really enjoy it.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm up there a whole bunch. And like, I'm really grateful. There's no way I'd be spending like 5 to 6 weeks leading that otherwise.
I know, it's pretty amazing to have that access.
Yeah, and like, definitely super sandbag in a great way.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, you know Kingsley?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well, I hope you make it through this season and see the silver linings. 'Cause,
You know, I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, cool.
I'm not working. I'm working with a really good partner.
Oh, nice.
Who I work with most of the time.
That's huge. That's half the battle.
Yeah.
Right there.
So you gotta take them up.
Oh, dude, I know. That was such a bummer. My hopes were so high, and then they were dashed on my front porch before I even left the house. So,
How you
but
feeling?
100%. Yeah, I'm feeling actually happier now that I've like got it over with. But, yeah. So.
Well, I really appreciate you doing all this.
Yeah, man.
You guys are. I emailed Pi Fund a few weeks ago. You guys are all working for scholarship, right?
Yeah, but some money's coming back. At this point this year, we're gonna probably keep it the way it is, but the next year we're gonna do more of like a rolling basis. But yeah, we had a hard deadline this year, and I think we're all done with it. But
well, whatever.
There's still lots of opportunities next season, and we're gonna hopefully do some more like free Avi Ed stuff in the spring. So.
Awesome, sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you out there.
Nice, man. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Hey, man.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not having a whole lot of an exciting winter so far. But
Yeah.
I've been kind of like playing groomer tracks.
I saw your transitioning. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
trying
I'm
to
excited for it.
do some other things.
Cool, man.
Yeah, it's all a process of stuff. It's very much locked into paying bills.
Yep. I know. That's his life.
Yeah. But I'd be happy to be a close calls.
Oh,
candidate.
totally, dude. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not something I put out all publicly, but
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
it's obviously up to
it's on
you.
my own terms, but no, this far removed, and it's actually I think February 17th. That'll be like right about
Close to the day.
the 19th was the anniversary, but I'm happy to be a part of that and to share my experience from a very just like this was my experience. This is what I have to learn. This is what I can share.
That'd be awesome, man.
Whoever wants to listen.
Okay, sweet. I appreciate that. Yeah, it'll probably be right here like in a month. And yeah, let me put you on the list. We're gonna kind of just like see who approaches us. But yeah, it's gonna be mostly, I'm excited, mostly younger folks who I think are more better at sharing like thought process and being vulnerable and stuff. So
Yeah, we'll let you go there.
that. That's awesome.
Cool. All right, Howdy's calling me. Gotta go.
All right. Later, man. Hey there.
Hey, my best man was working for Backcountry Partners.
Oh man, where'd they all go? I know there were a few people, but they kind of hung out in the back of the room and then left. But you are. Yes. And I met you at SAR. Remind me of your name?
Bruce.
Bruce. That's right. Chris.
I'm really enjoying the
Oh, you're a listener. Sweet. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just It's trial by fire, learning about the seat of my pants, but it's been fun to me. So I'm enjoying it. I know it's been less of the like snowpack discussion and more of just a kind of education or whatever, but glad you're listening. Yeah. The Avalanche incident debrief. Yeah.
That was actually a couple weeks after that.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yeah. It's exciting to see all these different threads kind of come together, and yeah, I'm psyched. It's fun to be working on something I'm passionate about. So. Yeah. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming. And I think if there's any stickers back here, grab stickers.
Yeah, 15 is as tall as it goes. Good to go. All righty.